I thought I knew everything about the woman I married until a DNA test revealed she'd been sleeping with my best friend for 3 years. What I discovered next didn't just destroy my marriage, it shattered everything I believed about loyalty, friendship, and the family I thought we were building together. Let me take you back to where it all began. My name's Marcus. I'm 34 now. But this story starts when I was 28. Picture this. A guy who thought he had it all figured out. Great job in marketing, close-knit group of friends, and the most beautiful woman in the world who somehow chose to be with me. I met Rebecca at my buddy Jake's housewarming party 6 years ago. You know those moments in movies where time stops and everything else fades into the background? That actually happened to me. She was standing by the kitchen island, laughing at something someone said, and when she looked up and caught my eye, I swear my heart skipped 3 beats. Jake had been my best friend since high school. We played basketball together, double-dated through college, and when I got my first real job, he was the first person I called. He was the kind of guy who'd drive for hours just to help you move furniture, you know? The type of friend you think you'll have forever. That night at his party, Jake actually introduced us. Marcus, meet Rebecca. Rebecca, this is the guy I've been telling you about, the one who still thinks he can beat me at Call of Duty. We all laughed. And somehow, Rebecca and I ended up talking until 3 in the morning about everything and nothing. She was a teacher at the local elementary school, loved hiking, and had this infectious laugh that made everyone around her smile. Our first date was supposed to be dinner and a movie, but we ended up sitting in my car outside the restaurant for 2 hours just talking. We never even made it to the movie. 6 months later, she moved into my apartment. A year after that, I proposed on the same beach where we had our first weekend getaway. The wedding was perfect. Well, as perfect as weddings can be. Jake was my best man, of course. I still have the video of his speech somewhere. He's talking about how happy he was. That I'd found someone who could put up with my terrible jokes and my obsession with fantasy football. Rebecca looked radiant in her dress, and when she said I do, I genuinely believed we were starting our forever. Jake was around all the time, which felt natural. He'd come over for Sunday football, help me fix things around the house, and Rebecca always made sure to cook extra whenever he joined us for dinner. She'd joke that she had 2 husbands to take care of, and we'd all laugh. It felt like the perfect setup. My wife loved my best friend like a brother. My best friend treated her like the sister he never had. When Rebecca got pregnant 18 months ago, Jake was one of the first people we told. We'll never forget the look on his face when we shared the news. He got this strange expression for just a split second, almost like panic. But then he broke into the biggest grin and pulled me into one of those back-slapping bear hugs. "Dude, you're going to be an amazing dad," he said, and I believed him. Throughout the pregnancy, Jake was incredibly supportive. Maybe too supportive, but at the time, I just thought he was being a great friend. He'd come over with ice cream when Rebecca had cravings, help me paint the nursery, and even attended some of the doctor's appointments when I couldn't get off work. Rebecca always said how lucky we were to have someone like Jake in our lives. Little Ethan was born on a Tuesday morning in March. 7 pounds, 3 ounces of pure perfection. When I first held him, I cried like a baby myself. Rebecca looked exhausted but beautiful, and Jake showed up at the hospital within an hour of getting my text. He brought flowers for Rebecca and a tiny basketball onesie for Ethan. Those first few months of parenthood were a blur of sleepless nights and endless joy. Jake continued being the amazing friend he'd always been, helping with late-night diaper runs and bringing dinner when we were too tired to cook. Rebecca would joke that Ethan had 3 parents, and honestly, it felt like we were all in this together. But somewhere in those sleep-deprived months, I started noticing little things. Nothing dramatic, just tiny moments that didn't quite add up. Rebecca would get text messages that made her smile in a way that seemed different from her usual expressions. Sometimes when Jake came over, there'd be this split second of awkwardness before everything returned to normal. Rebecca started going to book club more often, though she never seemed to have much to say about what they were reading. I pushed these thoughts away because they felt ridiculous. This was Rebecca, the woman who cried during commercials about military homecomings. This was Jake, the guy who'd been in my wedding and held my son when he was just hours old. These were the 2 people I trusted most in the world. Looking back now, I realize I was living in willful blindness. I did and want to see what was right in front of me, because acknowledging it would mean my entire world was built on a lie. So I kept pushing down those nagging doubts kept believing in the family we'd built, kept trusting the two people who meant everything to me. If only I'd known that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones capable of hurting you the most. The first real crack in my perfect world came when Ethan was about 8 months old. I was changing his diaper one evening while Rebecca was making dinner, and I found myself really looking at my son for the first time in weeks. You know how it is with babies. You're so caught up in feeding schedules and sleep patterns that you sometimes forget to just observe them. But that night, something struck me as odd. Ethan had these piercing green eyes that seemed to look right through you. The thing is, neither Rebecca nor I have green eyes. Mine are brown, hers are blue. I remember from high school biology that two brown-eyed parents could have a blue-eyed kid, and blue and brown could make green. But something about Ethan's eyes seemed so distinctive, so familiar. "Hey babe," I called out to Rebecca, "did anyone in your family have green eyes like this?" She came over, wiping her hands on a dish towel, and glanced at Ethan. For just a moment I saw something flash across her face. Was it panic? Fear? But then she smiled and said, "Oh, you know how baby eye color changes. My cousin had eyes that color when she was little." I nodded and let it go, but the seed of doubt was planted. A few weeks later, my mom came over for Sunday dinner. She was holding Ethan, making those grandmother cooing sounds, when she suddenly got quiet. "Marcus," she said slowly, "has anyone ever told you that Ethan looks a lot like Jake did as a baby?" She was looking at the baby with this puzzled expression. "I was just thinking about those photos your mother-in-law showed me from Jake's christening." My blood went cold. "What do you mean, Mom?" But Rebecca quickly interjected with a laugh that sounded just a little too forced. "Oh, all babies look alike at this age. People are always seeing resemblances that aren't really there." My mom nodded, but I caught her giving Ethan another long look before changing the subject. That night, after Mom left, I found myself studying Jake more carefully. When he came over to watch the game, the shape of his jaw, the way his eyebrows arched, that distinctive cleft in his chin. Then I'd look at Ethan sleeping in his bouncer and my stomach would twist into knots. I started noticing other things too. Like how Rebecca always seemed to know exactly when Jake was coming over, even when he claimed it was a spur-of-the-moment visit. How she'd gotten a new phone recently and was suddenly very protective of it, keeping it face down and taking it with her even to the bathroom. How she'd started doing her hair differently and buying new clothes, claiming she needed to feel like herself again after the baby. The breaking point came on a Saturday afternoon when I came home early from a work event. I'd texted Rebecca that I was on my way, but maybe she didn't see it. I walked into our living room and found Rebecca and Jake sitting closer together on the couch than friends typically would. They jumped apart when they saw me, and Jake started talking too fast about some story from work. "I thought you were at that conference thing until tonight," Rebecca said, her voice higher than usual. "It ended early," I replied, watching both of their faces carefully. "Am I interrupting something?" "No, of course not," Jake said quickly. "I just stopped by to see if you wanted to grab a beer later, but Rebecca said you were busy." But here's the thing. Jake's car wasn't in the driveway. It was parked 2 streets over, which I'd seen on my way home, but hadn't thought much of at the time. Now it seemed significant. Why would he park so far away, unless he didn't want neighbors to know he was here? That night I couldn't sleep. I lay there listening to Rebecca breathe beside me, watching the ceiling fan spin, letting all these doubts swirl around in my head. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid, that new fathers sometimes get weird thoughts, that stress and lack of sleep can make you imagine things that aren't there. But then I'd remember the way they jumped apart on the couch, the way Rebecca's face flushed when she saw me, how Jake couldn't quite meet my eyes for the rest of his visit. I started paying closer attention to their interactions. During our usual Sunday dinners, I'd watch how Jake looked at Rebecca when he thought I wasn't paying attention, how Rebecca would find excuses to touch his arm when she laughed at his jokes, how they seemed to have inside jokes and shared glances that I wasn't part of. The worst part was how natural it all seemed. If I hadn't started looking for it, I might never have noticed. They weren't obvious about whatever was happening between them. They were careful, respectful even, never crossing obvious lines when I was around. But once you start seeing the signs, you can't unsee them. 3 weeks after the couch incident, Rebecca announced she was going out with her book club friends for the evening. But when I called the restaurant, she said they were going to. Just to see if she'd left her sunglasses there, they told me no book club had reserved a table that night. When she came home around midnight, her hair smelled like Jake's cologne. I confronted her gently, not wanting to sound accusatory. "How was book club?" I asked as she got ready for bed. "Oh, same as always. Talked about the characters and had some wine." "What book are you reading again?" She paused for just a beat too long. "The one about the woman who travels to Italy? You wouldn't like it." But I knew Rebecca well enough to know when she was lying. She had this tell. She'd touch her earring when she wasn't being truthful. She was doing it right then. That's when I knew I had to face the possibility that everything I believed about my life might be wrong. The decision to get a DNA test didn't come all at once. Built up over weeks of sleepless nights and careful observation, like water slowly filling a bucket until it finally overflows. I spent hours researching everything online. How accurate home DNA tests were, what they could tell you, how much they cost. I'd do this late at night on my laptop while Rebecca slept beside me, feeling like I was planning some kind of betrayal. But was it betrayal to want to know the truth about my own son? The worst part was how normal everything seemed during the day. Rebecca would make coffee in the morning and kiss me goodbye before work. Jake would text about weekend plans. Ethan would babble and smile and reach for me with those tiny fingers. It was like living in two different realities, the happy family life during daylight hours and this growing nightmare of doubt that consumed me in the dark. I remember the exact moment I made up my mind. It was a Thursday evening, and Jake had come over for dinner as usual. Rebecca had made his favorite pasta dish, something she'd never made for me in all our years together. As I watched them interact over dinner, sharing stories and laughing, I realized I felt like a guest in my own home. After Jake left, I helped Rebecca clean up the dishes, I said. Trying to keep my voice casual, I was thinking about getting one of those DNA tests for Ethan. The ones that tell you about ancestry and genetic health risks. It might be fun to see what he inherited from both sides. Rebecca dropped the plate she was washing back into the sink with a loud clatter. "Why would you want to do that?" she asked. And there was something in her voice I'd never heard before. Fear, maybe? I don't know, just curious, I guess. My mom was asking about family medical history the other day, and I realized there's a lot we don't know. Could be useful information to have. She turned to face me, soap suds still on her hands. Those tests aren't always accurate, and they're expensive. Plus, what if we find out something we don't want to know, like a genetic predisposition to some disease? Her reaction told me everything I needed to know. An innocent person would have said sure, or maybe asked practical questions about cost or which company to use. They wouldn't immediately jump to worst-case scenarios and try to talk you out of it. That night, I ordered the test online while she was in the shower. 2-day shipping, which felt both too fast and not fast enough. The kit arrived on a Saturday when Rebecca was at the grocery store. It was such a simple thing, just a small box with swabs and instructions. But holding it in my hands felt like holding dynamite. Once I swabbed Ethan's cheek and sent it off to the lab, there would be no going back. I'd either confirm my son was mine and feel terrible for doubting, or I'd learn that my entire life was built on a lie. I hid the kit in my toolbox in the garage and spent the weekend in a weird state of suspended animation. Every time I looked at Ethan, I wondered if I was seeing Jake's features or imagining them. Every time Rebecca smiled at me, I wondered if she was thinking about him instead. Monday morning, after Rebecca left for work, I took Ethan into the nursery and opened the kit with shaking hands. He was in such a good mood, babbling and reaching for the colorful mobile above his crib. I felt like a monster for suspecting this innocent little person wasn't mine. "I'm sorry, buddy," I whispered as I gently swabbed the inside of his cheek. "Daddy just needs to know the truth." He didn't cry or fuss, just looked at me with those piercing green eyes that had started this whole mess. I sealed the sample according to the instructions, then collected my own saliva sample. 2 samples that would either confirm my family or destroy it. The hardest part was the waiting. The lab said results would take 3 to 5 business days, but every day felt like a week. I jumped every time my phone buzzed, thinking it might be the notification that results were ready. During those waiting days, I found myself memorizing everything about my life as it was. The way Rebecca hummed while she folded laundry. How Ethan's face scrunched up when he was about to cry. The sound of Jake's laugh during our Sunday football games. I had this superstitious feeling that once I knew the truth, I'd never be able to experience these moments the same way again. I also found myself watching Rebecca more carefully than ever. Did she seem nervous? Was she checking her phone more than usual? A few times I caught her staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. Once she asked out of nowhere, "Is everything okay with you lately? You seem distant." "Just work stress," I lied, which was ironic since I was getting better at lying myself these days. On Thursday evening, exactly 6 days after I'd sent the samples, I got the email. "Your DNA results are ready." My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type my password to log into the website. I was sitting in my car, outside my office building, having just finished a late meeting. The parking lot was mostly empty, which felt appropriate somehow. My world was about to collapse. At least I was alone. I stared at my phone screen, my thumb hovering over the link to view results. Once I clicked it, everything would change. Either I'd feel relief and guilt in equal measure, or I'd learn that the two people I loved most in the world had been lying to me for over a year. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and clicked the link. The page loaded slowly, or maybe time just felt suspended. I was sitting there in my car under a parking lot streetlight, the engine ticking as it cooled down, staring at a screen that was about to either restore my faith in humanity or shatter it completely. The first thing I saw was Ethan's photo that I'd uploaded with the sample, his chubby cheeks and bright eyes smiling back at me from the screen, completely oblivious to the fact that his existence was about to either confirm or destroy everything his father believed about love and loyalty. Probability of paternity: 0.00%. I read it 3 times before the meaning actually penetrated my brain. 0%. Not 99.99% like you see in the movies when the dad is confirmed. 0. The scientific explanation was right there and clinical. Matter-of-fact language. The alleged father cannot be excluded as the biological father of the tested child. Based on the analysis of DNA markers, the probability of paternity is 0.00%. My hands started shaking so violently I nearly dropped the phone. I set it on my lap and stared through the windshield at nothing, trying to process what I'd just learned. Ethan wasn't my son. It's the baby I'd held in the delivery room, whose first steps I'd celebrated, who called me Dada and reached for me when he was scared. He wasn't biologically mine, but the report wasn't finished destroying my world yet. I scrolled down and found something I hadn't expected. The lab had included additional analysis showing genetic matches with other samples in their database. There it was, in black and white. Close genetic match found: Jacob Mitchell. Probability of paternity: 99.97%. Jake had apparently done one of those ancestry DNA tests at some point, and his profile was in their system. I sat there in that parking lot for I don't know how long, just staring at those numbers. Cars passed by occasionally, their headlights sweeping across my windshield. But I felt completely isolated from the normal world continuing around me. Everything suddenly made horrible sense. Jake's strange expression when we announced the pregnancy, Rebecca's defensive reaction when I mentioned doing the DNA test, the way they'd been acting around each other, the mysterious book club meetings, Jake parking his car 2 streets away. All those little moments I'd rationalized away were actually evidence of a betrayal so profound it felt physical, like someone had reached into my chest and ripped out my heart. I tried to do the math in my head. When would Ethan have been conceived? Rebecca and I had been trying to get pregnant, so I remembered the time frame clearly. It would have been sometime in late June, early July of the previous year. I thought back to that period, trying to remember if there had been any signs, any opportunities. Then I remembered. Rebecca had gone on that girl's weekend trip to her college friend's bachelorette party. She'd been gone for 3 days, and when she came back, she seemed different somehow. More distant, less affectionate. I'd chalked it up to wedding stress and too much partying, but now I wondered if Jake had been there too. Had they planned it? Or was it a moment of weakness that spiraled into something bigger? My phone rang, and Rebecca's name appeared on the screen. For a moment, I considered not answering. What was I supposed to say? How do you have a normal conversation with someone when you've just discovered they've been living a lie for over a year? "Hey, honey," I answered, surprised by how normal my voice sounded. "Hi, babe. Just checking to see if you'll be home soon." Ethan's been fussy, and I think he misses his daddy. His daddy? The words hit me like a physical blow. I wasn't his daddy. Jake was his daddy. "I'll be home in a bit," I managed to say, just finishing up some work stuff. "Okay, love you. Love you too." I hung up and immediately felt sick for lying. But then again, she'd been lying to me for months, so maybe we were even. The drive home was a blur. I kept replaying moments from the past year, seeing them through this new lens of knowledge. How many times had Jake held his son while I thought he was just being a good friend? How many conversations had they had about their secret while I was at work? Did they laugh about how oblivious I was? Did they feel guilty, or had it been easy to deceive me? When I pulled into our driveway, I could see Rebecca through the living room window, holding Ethan and bouncing him gently. She looked so natural, so maternal, so loving. It was hard to reconcile this image with the woman who'd been cheating on me with my best friend. I sat in the car for several more minutes, trying to figure out how to handle this. Should I confront her immediately? Wait and gather more evidence? Pack a bag and leave? The DNA test had given me answers, but it hadn't given me a roadmap for what to do with those answers. Finally, I forced myself to get out of the car and walk toward the house. Rebecca smiled when she saw me through the window, that same warm smile I'd fallen in love with 6 years ago. Ethan reached his little arms toward me, and despite everything I'd just learned, my heart still melted a little. "There's Daddy," Rebecca said as I walked through the door, and I had to bite my tongue to keep from correcting her. I took Ethan from her arms and held him close, breathing in that perfect baby smell, feeling his tiny heart beat against my chest. DNA test or not, this little person had been my son for 8 months. He didn't know about the betrayal or the lies, just knew that I was the man who fed him bottles and changed his diapers and read him bedtime stories. But as I held him, looking into those familiar green eyes, I knew everything was about to change forever. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there next to Rebecca, listening to her breathe, wondering how someone could seem so peaceful while harboring such a massive secret. Every few minutes I'd look over at her sleeping face and try to reconcile this woman. I'd loved for 6 years with someone capable of such deception. Around 3 a.m., I got up and went to check on Ethan. He was sleeping peacefully in his crib, one tiny fist curled near his face. I stood there for a long time, just watching him breathe. This little person was innocent in all of this. Whatever happened between the adults, he didn't deserve to suffer for it. I'd made a decision by morning. I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't sit through another Sunday dinner with Jake, couldn't kiss Rebecca goodbye and act like everything was normal. Truth was eating me alive from the inside out. I waited until Rebecca had left for work and Ethan was down for his morning nap. Then I called Jake. "Hey man, what's up?" His voice sounded so casual, so normal. Part of me had expected him to sound different now that I knew the truth, but of course he had no idea I'd figured anything out. "We need to talk," I said. "Can you come over?" "Sure, everything okay? You sound weird?" "Just come over, Jake." He was there within 20 minutes, probably breaking several speed limits. He walked in with that familiar grin, but it faded when he saw my expression. "Dude, you look terrible. What's going on?" I was sitting at our kitchen table with my laptop open, the DNA results displayed on the screen. I turned it toward him without saying a word. I watched his face as he read. It was like watching someone's entire world collapse in slow motion. His eyes went wide, then he went pale, then he sat down heavily in the chair across from me. "Marcus, I can explain, can you? Because I've been trying to understand this for the past 12 hours, and I can't think of any explanation that makes this okay." He put his head in his hands. "It wasn't supposed to happen. It was just once at Lisa's bachelorette party. We were both drunk and you weren't there, and once I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Jake, you've been playing house with my family for 8 months. You've been holding your son and letting me think he was mine. You've sat at my dinner table and watched me plan for his college fund. That's not once, that's ongoing." "I wanted to tell you," he said, and for the first time since I'd known him, Jake looked genuinely broken. "God, Marcus, you have no idea how many times I almost told you. But then Ethan was born, and you were so happy, and I couldn't figure out how to destroy your life like that. So you decided to let me live a lie instead. I decided to let you be his father because that's what you are. Biology doesn't change the fact that you've been there for every moment of his life. You're the one he reaches for when he cries. You're the one who walks the floor with him at night. That test doesn't change any of that." I stared at him. "You really think that makes this better? That because I've been doing the work of being a father, it doesn't matter that you're the one who actually created him? That you and my wife have been lying to me for over a year?" Jake was crying now, which I'd never seen before in all our years of friendship. "I know it sounds insane, but I thought I was protecting you. I thought I was doing the right thing. The right thing would have been keeping your hands off my wife. That's when I heard Rebecca's car in the driveway. She was supposed to be at work for another 3 hours, but apparently Jake had texted her after I called him. They probably had some kind of emergency protocol for if their secret ever came out. She walked in looking terrified, her face flushed like she'd been crying on the drive over. She took one look at my laptop screen and Jake's defeated posture, and she knew it was over. Hush, please, let me explain. I'm listening. She sat down at the table, her hands shaking. It happened at Lisa's party. Jake was there because Lisa's invited some of his friends too, and you couldn't come because of that work conference. We were both missing you, talking about how much we wished you were there, and we drank too much wine. So you decided to comfort each other. It wasn't like that. It was stupid and wrong, and we both regretted it immediately. We decided to never talk about it again, to pretend it never happened. But then you found out you were pregnant? Rebecca nodded, tears streaming down her face. I prayed it was yours. I did the math over and over, trying to convince myself the timing worked out. When Ethan was born, I thought maybe we'd gotten lucky because he looked like he could be yours. But he didn't, did he? He looked like Jake, and you both knew it. Jake spoke up. We talked about telling you, multiple times. But then you were so excited about being a dad, and Ethan clearly adored you. So we couldn't figure out how to blow up your happiness like that. So instead you decided to blow up my entire sense of reality. Rebecca reached across the table toward me, but I pulled my hands away. Marcus, I love you. What happened with Jake was the biggest mistake of my life, but it doesn't change how I feel about you. You're Ethan's father in every way that matters. Except biologically, except honestly, except in the way that actually determines paternity. I closed my laptop and looked at both of them. I need you both to leave now. Marcus, please, Rebecca started. Leave. Take whatever you need for you and Ethan for a few days. Go stay with your sister or your parents. I need time to think. What about Ethan? Jake asked quietly. I looked at him, this man who'd been my best friend and was now my worst nightmare. What about him? He's your son. Figure it out. The next few weeks were the darkest of my life. The house felt like a tomb without Rebecca and Ethan's voices filling it. I'd find myself listening for the sound of Ethan babbling in his high chair, or Rebecca humming while she folded laundry. But there was only silence. I took time off work and spent most of my days just sitting on the couch, staring at family photos and trying to figure out where my life went from here. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal itself. It was realizing that some of my happiest memories were built on lies. That moment in the delivery room when I first held Ethan, Jake should have been the one experiencing that joy. All those nights I'd walk the floor with a crying baby, feeling like such a devoted father, was raising another man's son. My mom came by every day to check on me, bringing food I didn't eat and offering advice I wasn't ready to hear. She kept saying things like time heals all wounds and everything happens for a reason. But those platitudes felt hollow when your entire reality has been turned upside down. The hardest part was missing Ethan. Despite everything I'd learned, I still loved that little boy with every fiber of my being. DNA test or not, he'd been my son for 8 months. I'd been there for his first smile, his first tooth, his first attempt at crawling. Those moments were real, even if the circumstances around them were built on deception. Rebecca called every day, sometimes multiple times. At first I wouldn't answer, but eventually I started picking up because I needed to know how Ethan was doing. She'd tell me about his day, how he'd clapped his hands for the first time, or how he was starting to pull himself up on furniture. Each update was both a gift and a torture. He misses you, she told me during one of these calls. He keeps looking toward the door like he's waiting for you to come home. I'm not his father, Rebecca. Remember? Yes, you are. Biology doesn't erase 8 months of love and care. You're the only father he's ever known. But I wasn't ready to hear that yet. I was too angry, too hurt, too confused about what any of it meant. Jake tried to reach out too, but I wasn't ready for that conversation. I deleted his texts without reading them and let his calls go to voicemail. Our mutual friends started asking questions about why he wasn't around anymore, why Rebecca and I seemed to be having problems. But I couldn't bring myself to tell them the truth. How do you explain that your best friend slept with your wife and your son isn't actually your son? 3 weeks into this limbo, my mom finally forced a conversation I'd been avoiding. You need to decide what you want, Marcus, she said, sitting across from me at my kitchen table. You can stay angry forever, or you can figure out how to move forward. Move forward to what? My marriage is over. My best friend betrayed me. My son isn't my son. That baby loves you. Rebecca made a terrible mistake, but she loves you too. And Jake? Well, Jake's an idiot. But people make mistakes when they're drunk and emotional. This wasn't a mistake, Mom. This was months of lying to my face. You're right. It was. But now you get to choose what happens next. She was right. And I knew it. I could stay in this angry, hurt place forever, or I could try to salvage something from the wreckage of my life. That night, I called Rebecca and asked her to come over so we could talk. She arrived within the hour, bringing Ethan with her. When that little boy saw me, his face lit up with the biggest smile, and he reached his arms toward me like he'd been waiting weeks for this moment. Which, of course, he had been. I held him close, and for the first time since seeing those DNA results, I felt a little bit of peace. Whatever else was true, this little person needed me. Not because of genetics, but because love doesn't actually care about DNA. Rebecca and I talked for hours that night. We talked about her guilt, my hurt, whether our marriage could survive something like this. We talked about Jake, about whether he could ever be part of Ethan's life, about how to handle the complicated reality of a child with 3 parents who all loved him. It wasn't easy. There were more tears, more anger, more painful honesty than I'd experienced in my entire life. But somewhere in that conversation, I realized something important. I had a choice. I could let this betrayal define the rest of my life, or I could decide what kind of man I wanted to be moving forward. We're in counseling now, all of us trying to figure out how to navigate this impossible situation. Beck and I are working on rebuilding trust. Some days feels possible, and other days feels like climbing Mount Everest in flip-flops. Jake and I aren't friends anymore. I don't know if we ever will be again. But we're trying to find a way for him to be part of Ethan's life without destroying what's left of mine. The truth is, I'm still Ethan's father. Not because of biology, but because fatherhood is about showing up every day. It's about being the person a child can count on. About choosing love even when it's complicated and messy and doesn't fit into neat categories. Some nights, I still lie awake wondering what if. What if Rebecca had never gone to that party? What if Jake had stayed home?